When we're talking about making a comeback in your life, we can get technical and go into the details of every specific thing you can do. But whether it's grades, work, or relationships, you will be better at every single area if you just focus on optimizing your physical and mental performance. And it took me years of just endless trial and error to find what worked for me. But luckily for you, there's been so much research and new findings in this area that you'll be able to achieve your dream comeback in a fraction of the time. And there's one figure that I've learned a lot from. And if you've been watching this channel for some time, yes, that's Stanford neuroscientist Andrew Huberman. And I was lucky enough to attend one of his recent events, the Brain and Body Contract. Obviously, it was surreal seeing him in person, but more importantly, he gave a lot of really valuable insights in how to optimize your physical and mental performance. And it's not like the wishy-washy stuff you see online, it's practical, no BS advice. And I was actually lucky enough for him to answer some of my personal questions, which was super cool, so stay tuned for the answers for that. So the first thing that really struck me was the fact that if you look at this event, it's basically Huberman on the stage talking about biology to a crowd of people. The only thing to note here is that it's a Saturday evening. The venue is full of almost 5,000 people, and people had to pay hundreds for tickets to get in. So imagine this is your class. You're paying hundreds to go to a Saturday evening class to listen to some guy talking about biology. It was crazy to see the turnout, which was honestly kind of surprising. Like, I'm currently in med school at the moment and I hate listening to my lectures and I just want to get it over and done with as soon as possible. The idea that I'm trying to get at here is this: learning is meant to be fun. And that sounds like super weird to say because school has made learning seem uncool and boring because they hit you with all these pressures, exams, 8 a.m. classes, and it just overall just attaches all these negative connotations to learning. When in fact, like, you can probably relate to this. If you're learning something that you're actually interested in, you'll probably feel very engaged and it's probably extremely enjoyable. And just to give you a more personal example, I've been trying to go to the gym consistently this year. And one of the things that I find is that I really enjoy watching those like Jeff Nippard fitness YouTubers talking about like the anatomy or the exact like technique you want to use. And honestly, I procrastinate by watching their videos instead of doing the actual anatomy that I'm meant to do for med school. But it's just to show that if you're learning something you're interested in, it should be fun. But how does this relate to making a comeback? It's the idea that if you want to be constantly improving yourself, you need to be constantly learning. Now, it doesn't matter what topic or what medium it is. Personally, I recommend just watching podcasts because they're just quite easy to listen to. But this is like the prerequisite of making a comeback. You need to be constantly expanding your knowledge. The second takeaway I got from this event involves a very interesting experiment. So what the experimenters did in this case was they got a tank of zebrafish. And what they did is they waited until they fell asleep and they slowly pulled up to the tank and shined a massive bright light on the fish. And what they found was that this was probably one of the most optimal ways to kill the fish. Because what happens is that they're meant to be sleeping, you're shining a light, you're screwing up their body clock, and as a result, you're disrupting basically every single process that's occurring in these fish. And then what really stuck with me was that after Huberman talked about how this light basically like destroyed the fish, he said humans are doing this voluntarily to themselves. And I felt super targeted because that's exactly what I've been doing from time to time. Going on my phone right before I go to bed, or even in bed, looking at my phone, scrolling on, Instagram, social media, etc. And he mentioned an interesting point, which is that every mental health issue is linked with a disruption in normal circadian rhythms. And the way I kind of understood it is that your brain is like trapped inside, your skull. So you can't see the outside world. It needs a way to anchor itself in space and time. And the way it does that is through the light you see in the morning and the darkness that you see at night. But what happens when we introduce artificial light and all these things is that we basically just screw up this process and we just end up looking at like the shriveled, stunted zebrafish that we saw before. It's like if you were to go through a busy day of yours with everything you have planned, but you're not allowed a clock. So you don't know what time it is, and you can probably already imagine that is going to be chaotic. And so to kind of remedy this, the advice that I've been trying to follow is that as soon as I wake up, I try and get just a blast of sunlight. And at nighttime, obviously sometimes it's unavoidable to use your devices, so I'll just try and use the night shift mode. But basically just make sure I get a lot of light in the morning and not a lot of light in the evening, so my body clock isn't like screwed. Now, the second part of this event was a live Q&A, and I actually managed to get 2 of my questions picked. So the first one was, how do we mindlessly stop scrolling on our phones? And this is by far one of the biggest issues for me that's just sapped so much time from me trying to do productive things. And Huberman talks about how essentially it's just very difficult because, especially for like our generation, phones are something that it's part of our lives, it's part of our identity. Like I remember like back in even primary school, we had like phones and iPads and all of that. And he mentioned an interesting story of a person that as his phone battery like decreased over time, he literally felt like his life force was being sucked away. And the opposite, as his phone was charging, he felt like he was like recharging as a person, which honestly just shows you the extent of like, you know, our phone addictions nowadays. And so his answer was basically, you need to put a barrier between you and social media or whatever game or app that you procrastinate the most with. And the most common form of this is just deleting your apps and then reinstalling them. And honestly, I was hoping for like some cool hack that, you know, no one's ever heard of. But thinking about like my own habits, sometimes I would just out of muscle memory open my phone and then just scroll to the Instagram app without even thinking. Just deleting your app. It takes so much effort to then reinstall, log back in, do the like two-factor authentication that it greatly like reduces the amount of like urges that you get. For me at least, and maybe you can relate, since this has been such like a disruption to like my productivity, it's probably the best way for me and for those in a similar position. So my second question was on willpower, and is it like a muscle that can be trained? Short answer, yes. And where is this muscle located? Well, it's a region of the brain called the AMCC. And basically, when you do something hard or difficult that you really don't want to do, like study or cold shower or exercise, then this area of the brain grows in plasticity. And the reverse is true. If you do something comfortable, like sitting on the couch playing video games, this area downregulates and downshifts. And it's kind of rare to think of these like mental muscles. Like if you want to train your biceps, you just do a few curls and, you know, your bicep muscle grows. But it's the same thing with like these mental muscles. If you lean into challenge, constantly do things that you don't want to do things when you don't feel like it, then this area of the brain grows. And so it becomes easier to maintain things that you used to feel challenging. Like literally before this Huberman event, my friend and I were like trying to push each other out of our like comfort zones. And so basically my friend got me to like go up to one of Huberman's cameramans and like, you know, strike up a conversation. And honestly, I was like pretty nervous because I usually don't like just go up to strangers. And he seemed like he was like pretty busy as well. But honestly, that interaction went super well, super friendly guy. And I learned a lot about, you know, what it's like to be like Andrew Huberman's cameraman. But whatever it is, if you go and chase after discomfort, this grows your willpower muscle. It can be a social challenge. It can be like an academic challenge or a physical challenge. If you go and chase after discomfort, this grows your willpower muscle. And it may feel like basic advice, but the difficult thing is actually integrating this into your life and doing it consistently. That's the key to making your comeback.